Shaykh, Fadhlalla, Haeri, and Bilgrami translated the Lantern of the Path. I'm not seeing the name of the book listed here in transliteration of any sort, so I'm just going to presume that it's Assabariq, from 702 to 765 of the Common Era. Ja'afar ibn Muhammad As-Sadiq lived, are from the 17th of the 3rd month of 83 till the 15th of the 10th month of 148 al-Hijra. Sayyid Mohsin Muzaffar Naqvi helped in the translation because some of the words are archaic. The 7 principles of fear, striving, enduring, spiritual discipline, seeking truthfulness and sincerity, withdrawing the self from what it loves, and binding it in poverty, is put together with that principle of the willing bondage to God. And I would say perhaps fear isn't the right word, because regard is broader reaching, and that tends to be what we're talking about. It's essential to realize what we are missing and what terms we are under. We need to be careful about where we look, where we pay our attention. We need to be careful about the style of our movement. We need to not only seek knowledge, but live knowledge. When we make a judgment, we should regard what the revelation has to say about it, what's commanded and what's forbidden, what adjust other things. Like, for example, in the Sunni narrations, we had that the Quran is the final word. Bukhari Muslim have that. And some of the earlier sayings are abrogated by some of the later sayings. What we encourage and discourage should be things that are what's right for ourselves, or if we were in that position, then, it would be right for us. It's not as important to pick things apart as it is to develop an awareness of what you're among. Don't make a point of being fantastical, and learn to act regardless of the perception that others are going to have of it. Seek blessing more than you seek a particular means of blessing. You may make a choice to start something, but it's not always up to you whether or not you finish it. And when you go or come, try to make it only about what is right. If you go home for a rest, want it to be towards you being able to do more of what is right the next day or do it better. Be careful of how you go over sacred things. Seek spiritual refuge, even in reciting of the best things. Consider the impact of what's supposed to be done with it. Consider first if your outward appearance is affected by your obedience to God. Is how you dress and all that stuff, is that according to those principles? Or is it according to fad? Is it according to what you like? Or according to what's good for you? Don't seek to mimic what is popular. Seek to do what is right in your actions. The true jihad is, again, to work outside, relying on the approval of those around one. Be so truthful that you find the good and truth in others, in other paths, that you affect others with the degree of truthfulness which you are upon. Be content with what you are capable of. If you have any doubts whatsoever about your ability to get something done, just try your best and be content with what you have done. There is the hedonistic approach where you regard the consequences, where you're looking whether something's harmful or beneficial to anyone or yourself or whatever. But when it comes to that, or morals themselves, real morals, not, societally or personally imposed morals, these are things that, if you're not sure at all, it's best just to stay away from it. It's okay to regard criticism of others. We should also realize that people are flawed, and we need to overlook that sometimes and make an account of yourself rather than waiting till the day of judgment to be told how good or bad you are, or waiting till you die to have it illustrated to you on the way. Reputation is important, but don't seek the company of others just for that sake. Sleep a healthy amount, not necessarily whatever is possible, and that varies per person. And there are certain watches of the day that we have been told aren't good to sleep in. Like, for example, it's preferred after the dawn prayer not to sleep until after the sun is risen clearly above the horizon. But it's not forbidden. Same thing with in the evening. It's just preferred not to sleep in the evening. Wait till after the dusk prayer. The midday or night nap, or the early afternoon nap, the morning nap after, in the hotter part of the morning or something. These are good things to take advantage of, you could say. It's best to sleep between the dusk and the dawn prayer, but it's good to wake up some in between. Like when you wake up, just don't wake up and get back to sleep as soon as you can. Take a minute, maybe take a few minutes. One will find that you don't actually lose sleep by doing this stuff. When you go on pilgrimage, it isn't to say you go on pilgrimage. Just like when you go to war, hopefully just war, right? Which is almost non-existent. But, you don't do it expecting to return. You're giving up your life. But in both things, you're doing what is obliged of you. You're not after souvenirs or whatever. Is this required? And I'm trying to make sure that I'm able to do this at this particular time and go this place and this particular thing, to be able to say this at this particular way. Pilgrimage is not spiritual tourism. Charity is first towards others. Charity can regard of every aspect of life. You can definitely give in charity towards the place of worship, but the obligations are towards the poor. Improve your intention as you improve your knowledge. You may be rewarded for not doing the things that you think about that you shouldn't do, but it's best to work out your thinking so that you don't think of doing what is wrong. Yeah, you think of what's possible, but you work your thinking towards, because if you're thinking, oh, it's wrong, I'd want to do it, but it's wrong, that's what you need to work on. Not even the perfect are worshiping God as God deserves. And constant remembrance of God is the idea. Now, we're not chanting in the bathroom or something like that, but it is good that we are aware of the principles and even there. In the Bible, it talks about not using God's name in vain. Well, we're after that too, right? But we're supposed to mention God's name frequently. We're supposed to mention the verses frequently. So what does this vain mention mean? What does this not in profanity mean? It's that, it's a sacred act. And these sacred acts extend outside these sacred acts. Focus on the agreed upon matters. Agreed upon by the people of purity, the innocents. See blessing as a phenomenon. The reality that people become aware of should be centered on the level of gnosis that the prophets had. Because certainly, as I've found as time goes on, that, for example, what came through Muhammad that we're certain about, like the Quran, everything good or true is supported by it, and everything evil or ignorant is condemned by it. It said that each prophet came with 12 chiefs. The Sunnis say it was 12 main people during the life of Muhammad. The Shia say it was a succession. And this is a belief before they had the succession in any way worked out. Now, there are narrations about 7 and stuff like that, but even in the Sunni narrations have this thing about the succession afterwards. Because there wasn't this focus in Islam, like in Christianity, of the 12 disciples or the 70 disciples. The Sufis sometimes in particular try to list them, but it's not thought of in the same way. And it's said that they have the qualities of praised, high, out of nothing, beneficence, beautiful. Don't make judgments about what you don't know about, and focus on the rights of those around you. Hypocrites can attain to the lowest level of humanity, the worst level of humanity. So to protect yourself from that, one of the things, we've already talked about not showing off, don't be too loud, don't be too quiet, whatever. You regard the old and the young. Like, a hypocrite when they're like, oh, this person's younger than me or this person's older than me, so therefore, I can't consider their opinion. Because it's for everybody in society to be able to say something, to be able to correct one another, but not, as we've seen, not merely because they're personal tastes. That's not what determines right and wrong. I mean, some things about your health, you'll find those indications in how you experience them, but it's important for everybody to be heard and for their needs to be taken care of. But if parents are not asking you what is wrong, then there is a general obedience to it. And, of course, what is fair amongst that? Be humble and result-driven. Work on expressing subtle reality. We deserve religious knowledge, but sometimes ignorance is based on what we're claiming that we deserve to know. What we, otherwise, you should tell me, you should give me access, that sort of thing. Or they have worked to achieve access to find out things. It's not totally that you should want helped or that you should want to help others. Kind of lies somewhere in between that. Don't just eat for pleasure. Eat to have a good sustenance. And over time, all that sugar and maybe stuff that you shouldn't have at all or whatever, you realize you don't need it. Food tastes better without all the chemicals and the sugar and the unpermissible ingredients. Of course, as you know, I was raised Christian, so I violated some of the rules of eating and consuming. But I realized experiencing months out of the other, or by that time, maybe it was a year or whatever, I experienced that life was better without it. Whether it was something they prescribed me that I didn't need for survival or healing, but they're just taught, drug you half to death, right? And of course, I'm glad because no more liver damage from painkillers, right? There's evil influences, and these evil influences add up. Don't think because one has been tempted many times that one is just going to do well with that final temptation. But one of the things that starts is that push towards, what towards not remembering. And once you not remember, once you're not serving God, those moments are the ones in which you become vulnerable. That's why the entertainment form of music is generally agreed on as forbidden. You don't waste your time. Lahwal hadith or something like that is, I think that's the phrase. Be content in doing good, but don't even be proud of doing good. You are what you are overall, and that can overtake your good deeds. Don't hold back in giving, just because of what you think the future could be. The focus should be what you can do with your wealth, not whether or not you're going to be wealthy. Reflect on the good and bad consequences here and hereafter in regards to your deeds. When you open a ritual, and by ritual I mean, your contact prayers or whatever, you absorb yourself in that ritual. Like that's it. Like there is no other world than the ritual in which you are in. Bowing in prayer is not only to regard the outer form and perhaps the muscles and stuff and breathing and stuff to help one do that better. It's to realize that you're being humbled, that you are, the light you bring is not totally your own. This is what has been bestowed upon you. Likewise, when you render that position of submission, you were occupied not in stretching and breathing or even the words you were saying. You were occupied in realizing that whatever you give up for God is not something that is lost. When you point that finger and say your testimony as you're reflecting, you're realizing you're directing your interaction. You're relying on that interaction. What you do is not just your choice, but it's something you've been given permission to do. When you give the peaceful greetings that end the prayer, don't make them hypocritical by violations of that wholeness when you leave your prayer. Because those greetings, you think about it, they're right and left. You're essentially indicating to the external world. Regret is not about suffering. Regret is to be constantly attached to that rope of God, in which you're self-correcting. You're ever pushing forward, regardless of what's outside the path of the rope. Retreat from the world, starting with your speech, and then the rest of your body. It's usually best to hold back on some of your expression, to hold back your speech in particular. Speak about what you know, what's necessary, what's good. Don't just be a person of your passions. Direct those passions with the intellect. Don't involve those passions in what's not right. Don't use those passions as an excuse to not do what you should be doing. Don't use those passions just to be amused. Avoid wanting. Certainly, try to redirect yourself from those wants that aren't of value or aren't of the right values. Don't look at giving or taking as if someone is better than the other. Just be careful of your beliefs regarding what's happening. Don't rely on expectations. Don't allow the outer form of your actions become corrupted, because then the inner will follow. If you're unable to physically do something like a posture in prayer or whatever you want to, if you're unable to do the fast either a particular day or at all, want to do the fast. Because once you give up on wanting to do what would be right if you were capable of doing it, then you're lacking in those forms corrupts your inside. Sometimes well-being, are as much as we're supposed to be on in our situation, is something that we have to abandon our situation for. Abandon our place, abandon something. The universal requirements of worship for everyone, when rigidly adhered to, are the fountainhead of everything else in your life being an aspect of worship. Make a regular reflection on death. Make a regular reflection on, symbolic death, that which comes to an end. Find your rest, find your contentment in the command of God. What you've been allowed, what you've not been allowed, your fate per se. Now, this does not mean you don't criticize the wrong that's been done for you. Like, one of the things that's a growing problem in my country is landlords and companies in particular that are landlords focusing on profits when they are allowing substandard living to come in. You're supposed to reduce your profits, if there's molding and leaking and that sort of stuff that's going on. You fix the place with the money before you make profit on it. Your wanting can hurt you. Your beliefs can hurt you. Suffering is a choice. Suffering is not the difficulty itself. Suffering is you're hurting yourself with it wanting to be different. I mean, yeah, sure, you want hardship to end, but that's not what I mean. Faith, hope, and love are shown by movement, pursuit, and preference. Opening yourself is one thing. But you also need to be willing to lower yourself and to stop yourself from stuff, to uplift yourself in the judgments that are in accord with God's judgments. If you can't use the toothstick, it is still important to brush your teeth. Now, there's certain chemical toothpaste and stuff like this that you may not want to use for health or other reasons, or even legal reasons. Some countries take American toothpaste at the airport, but protect your mouth because of the instrument that it is. Regard your going to the bathroom as it's an opportunity to get rid of impurities. And elsewhere you find that one is modest, one tries not to get more on oneself or clothes than is absolutely necessary for that to occur. You clean off from yourself and your clothes anything that gets on you as best as you can. And, you don't take a lot of time in there. The people in there, even religious books in there, people even put religious books in the bathroom, and it's like, no, that's absolutely unacceptable. You go there, you take care of what you need as soon as possible, and actually they find that reading, not only is it disrespectful, whatever text you're reading, and the consciousness associated with it, that it's like, oh, well, I get most of my scripture reading done in the bathroom. There are Christians that get most of their scripture reading done when they're on the toilet, and that actually increases their problems with using the toilet. Well, on multiple levels, right? It's important to get and try to maintain ablutions as much of your life as possible, I guess, even outside of the ritual prayers and attending a place of worship. But we need to identify with the process of cleansing, identify with that essentially the water and stuff is pure from heaven. It can become contaminated on earth. We're well aware of that in multiple ages and multiple ways. When you approach a place of worship, you are approaching royalty. You're approaching a place where the secular world does not exist. So it should not be mentioned. Yeah, sure, the ethics, the spiritual whatever associated with these issues. When you supplicate, have good manners about it. Regard who you're supplicating to, how, what you're supplicating about. Sure, there's a time where you can supplicate for the sake of health, wealth, and progeny. But it's not just about health, wealth, and progeny, or your mere desires. Do your fasting for God, hoping the reward of God. Sure, there's that reward when you break your fast and your experience of that. There's the done right, it's a pleasurable thing to break your fast more than other meals that just went a couple hours without food. But fasting is more than just depriving yourself of food, drink, and sex between the dawn and the sunset. Abstinence is not so much of, a deprivation, but a deprivation of things for mere comfort. Food, drink, and sex with one's spouse is certainly, they're important things to do regularly and occasionally in unexpected times or something. I am careful about the association with that. But you know what I mean. There's some degree of spontaneity about all three of those. While in fasting, it's a delay. Oh, they'll be fulfilled later. Abstinence, of course, what is wrong amongst those and other things, then one holds back from it. But one holds back from the worldly just to be the worldly. Like the fact of all this ridiculous packaging. You buy something and the package is, you think you got a full thing half the time. Well, you learn not half the time even. But yeah, you can buy something and the package can make it look 5 times as big. It's like, that's just this worldly adornment of this stuff. We should be able to get just a little package and go our way, like they used to. Used to be people used to buy a little bag of something, and they bought a little bag of something. They didn't buy a box with the thing, and then you open the thing up. It's like, man, that's a lot of packaging. And it didn't even need packaging, the type of thing it is, right? The world for itself is like pride, avarice, greed, dissimulation, desire, heedlessness, annihilation, and it leads to extinction. Like, people look at like the lesson of the devil card in the tarot, and the devil card in the tarot is like the material world for itself. That's the chief step. Is as long as people are serving the world, then the world is evil. But the world's not evil itself. Islam, for example, even admits the good or benefit or whatever in the forbidden. It just says that the harm outweighs the benefit, or the sin outweighs the benefit, or it's the deeds of the devil, as in, one can get those sorts of pleasures elsewhere. Don't be reluctant to act. Don't be one of these people that are all grumbling and all that. Now, one should stop and consider before one acts sometimes, but it shouldn't be that, one is hesitant. It's like one of the worst things about people's experience about being Muslim is when they're not being Muslim in this respect. I mean, most of it is straight up tied to that. It's about dragging your feet and making more of an effort about dragging your feet than not doing what you shouldn't do and doing what you should do. One of the worst things that can happen to someone is delusion and illusion. It's not that this world is unreal. It's that people are preferring something now or something under certain conditions than waiting for that type of thing, or trying to find that type of thing in a better context. Hypocrisy is to disregard what is wrong, even if that just means in others. To not consider serious the hardships that may occur. Which doesn't mean you can't be like, well, there's more important things. Hardship, hey, I'm getting this done right. Some people will make a point of showing off. They'll raise their voice, not as needed to be heard, but for putting on a show. They'll end up preferring a good hear, like that's entirely it. They'll even help people out. The other things, one of the things that they try to get you to do through the media, which is important not to watch the fake news, as it's called, is that they want you to be supportive, at least in soul, mind, heart, maybe some vocalization in support of, well, you're not physically doing the war, you're not physically doing these this vast pollution that these celebrities or these corporations are doing, but you're part of it, but they want to get you to feel like you can be a part without taking, ultimate responsibility, but you do take ultimate responsibility. And these groups of people and these individuals, they're able to do what they do because of that, right? Don't violate what's right for others. Try to associate yourself with the best company. Sure, there's worldly things you need to accomplish, but I'm meaning those of pious action, those who seem to be upon the right beliefs. There are some minor differences between, individuals and stuff like this, but be very, very careful of this idea of, well, it's allowable for me. But we do regard, is this going to be good for me or someone else in terms of our giving and taking? Find yourself what are called soulmates in different types of relationships and operate in that way. That spiritual brotherhood, that spiritual sisterhood, that you're not just interacting for selfish reasons, you're interacting for the sake that these things are right. That it's good to do local business or whatever, that can be part of it. Find yourself proper counsel, but do consult with others in making decisions sometimes. It's not pure democracy because, what should be done and what should not be done shouldn't be up to the popularity of the decision, but it should regard the different parts of society and that. But when you seek your knowledge and that sort of stuff, try to seek it from, but of course, don't just go around fishing. Oh, I'm going to ask all these different people in all these different ways, whether this is right or wrong or that sort of thing. And, they're just going to pick and choose, what seems pleasing at the moment or something. That's not it either. Put up with the difficulties of the world. You can point out that, hey, this way of treating is not right. In fact, that's often better. I've heard of people, even in some of the worst circumstances, saying, fear God, and people stop, or people don't do what they were about to do. The worst of crimes. When people are guided, it's best to follow their guidance. People act like they're all independent and it's their own way and all this other stuff. And it's like, especially when you see that, you tend to see even more of this idea that, no, they're following someone else. They act like they're not, but they are. So regard the source of, one's knowledge and one's actions. If you want to be pardoned for something, seek pardon with God. Of course, you regard those which you have wronged and try to reconcile yourself with them. I mean, as far as what's right, sometimes people will try to get people to do stuff that's wrong. As part of, I will forgive you if you do something wrong. It's like, no. Pardon shouldn't be used as a power that people have over people. God has that power. God has the terms of how we should pardon and be pardoned. If you want to bring something out, but don't go beyond the limits in it. Involve yourself in what your outer being and your inner being are accepting of. Don't create that inner conflict, as it said. But that doesn't mean give up on your inner being trying to be the self-correcting soul, driving you towards the content soul. When you give advice, have it be focused on drawing close to God, on remembering God. And when you seek it, have that be the same. If you want to experience trust, if you want to go beyond your current vessel in that respect, abandon your hopes for your hopes. Truly take on Allahu Akbar. Not just the 5 prayers, but that inner sense of God is greater than fill in the blank. Or leave it blank or whatever. The blessing goes beyond your vessel. And you want that blessing for your fellow human being as well. You don't want people to die in misguidance and cursed and all that stuff, but you want even those who are your enemies to turn around and likewise end up in a station like that. And you don't have to support anybody in doing wrong towards that. Whether somebody's richer or poorer, better physically or worse physically, better socially or in a worse social position, doesn't matter. We respect them. When you know of somebody more disciplined than yourself, somebody that is doing more good than yourself, well, this should motivate you towards striving harder yourself. And you don't have to strive hard in a way that breaks, the real you. You can work yourself up in a way that does not burn you out and isn't stingy about how slow the progress is either. Regard death as a promise. Sure, it's like Ali ibn Talib said, that, you live as if you're going to live forever, and live as if you're going to not live anymore. Because, this isn't some seeking death, but, realize that death is an opportunity for blessing, that it is a reality that you're going to have to encounter. So you better make it a opportunity for blessing. And I'm not, saying self-harm or anything ridiculous like that somebody probably is going to insert if people actually watch this video through with enough people. But, I mean, it's something you prepare for. But don't do stuff towards your death. What Surah 4 mentioned, you don't cause your own death. And, that can mean drugs, that can mean food, that can mean whatever. But don't make things the decision of, are you going to live longer or not live longer? That's not the point. Even the Vedas make that point. And no, I'm not saying the Vedas are Islamic. Well, maybe in the root you could say they were, but good opinions are most commonly tied to good beliefs. So if you focus on good beliefs, then you'll form good opinions around that. But if you say, I think, or it's, my personal thing, it's not, in that sense, it's no longer part of the relationship. But if you're trying to bring out your good beliefs, your good conclusions as part of as part of your conclusions, you're connecting to that, to rightful belief, then the greatest way of being carefree is to put your care in God, realizing your need in God, rather than your conceptions of what you might consider best outside of that. Even the best of us will vary in terms of our beliefs and actions, but if we focus on the right actions, saying and going over the best of things, these things can enter our hearts. And so if people are a witness of what is best, if they go over what is best outwardly, then that becomes something inwardly. Because our greatest hope, our greatest sense of being carefree, I'm not sure when I pressed the pause earlier, so hopefully I'm not repeating anything or too much. But yeah, our greatest sense of hope is in putting things over to God, realizing we have need of God, not necessarily the conditions that outside of how we've actually been guided are what is best. Because then we realize, maybe, is this good or not? Well, maybe, we'll see. Be fearful of, what might be recorded as far as what you've done, right? Be fearful what you're capable of that's not right. But hope that you'll do what is best and have consequences better than anything you can think of. Let not our attachment be with what is merely present, unless we're talking about the omnipresence of God, which is not the same as panentheism. The furthest out, the furthest in, around everything in between. Let's find our contentment in being a devotee of God. Let us realize that what we go through has afflicted us, it's our opportunity. It builds up what we have. The effort and how we've been deprived and all that other stuff factors into just how great or meritorious or rewarding or whatever phrase you want to put on it our deeds are. Patience is not that you just let bad things happen to you. You definitely speak out, but your patience, a sabr, is the enduring, the ever consistent nature of it. That quality is, you're steadfast, you're firm, you're, in some senses, some people aren't going to know what the Lucifer principle is, but one of the aspects of the Lucifer principle is the firmness. It's not, I don't mean Lucifer as in some demon, I mean, the Venus thing as a symbol. I'm not worshiping Venus either, but you know what I mean, maybe. And, you're willing in that state of, things aren't always as one would want them. They're not as easy to be this way of thought and action. You may be aware of certain lacking, but, you're turning it to God. Only God can truly end the difficulty or make it not difficult. Some people seem like they're going through a lot of difficulty, but it's less difficult than the so-called people in ease. You see some of these wealthy people, powerful people that are just miserable. Shame may not be as important of a motivation, but it's certainly one of our strongest. So don't do things to bring shame on oneself. And by shame, I mean, real shame, not just, some, that's unpopular, that's something, some sort of artificial thing, because there are real things that can or should bring shame. It's like, why do people have to get used to uncovering or just being indiscriminate in some way? The true Gnostic is one that doesn't forget God amongst all the worldly, amongst all the people. So alone in a crowd of people, but you're not suffering in your aloneness. It's just, you're not in the crowd of people for the crowd of people. Did I say 91 chapters? I meant 99 chapters. Our love of God should extend and go to everything else, right? It doesn't close us off to more love. You got that love with God as the servant, and with us as servant and God as master. We have that where God's our friend, where we love God like a parent or as a child. We love God as a spouse. We love God as, in a socially inappropriate way, but we love God in a way that includes our love of everything else. How we're in charge, how others take charge of us, how we're friends, our friendships are for love of God, how we treat our family, and how we just go beyond, what society will necessarily accept. Because people are like, well, if they do accept you to do what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, they often won't accept what's extra. When it's not like that, then to greater and greater degrees, your friends and such are even going to be as if they are your enemies. Because, it should be towards the right actions. It should be towards the right consciousness. How you're having your relationships in this world. One's living, one's dying, one's prayers, one's whatever are not for the worldly fulfillment, but this yearning for and towards God. To be spiritually wise is more important than anything that this world has to offer. Be careful of these stations that you claim for yourself. Our knowledge, our states, or whatever, in general, hold back. Try to be a person that doesn't need to be questioned all the time. Why do you do this, or why do you do that? Sure, little kids ask like that, but in general, that's not the approach that people should be having to you. We talk about revelation and inspiration, but there's also the books of nature and the books of yourself, and you should take the lessons in this world that you witness as well. That doesn't mean what people think you should learn or be upon or something that, well, if they teach you, don't focus on what you would think you could possibly be in charge of. Focus on the sort of person that you should be, and be content as far as one's doing that. Avoid speaking ill of anybody in a way that's, it's not a moral fault. If this isn't clearly right and wrong, just stay out of it. And certainly don't say things that aren't true against people. If anything, give people the benefit of the doubt. Islam is a relationship with the Creator. If you seek Islam, seek that relationship with the creation according to the terms in which the Creator has laid down. Learn from the circumstances, not only in regards to the revelation and the inspiration, but to the rest of existence as well.